It's 11 p.m., the proposal is on your screen. Your team sent it to you over 4 hours ago, but yet you're here rewriting it. Not because it's wrong, but because it's not what you would have done. You told yourself a few things about this, that you're a perfectionist, that your team isn't at your level yet, or that you're just hard to work for. But none of that is actually what's happening. What you're feeling when you take that work back isn't perfectionism, it's identity threat. And delegation feels like amputation for a reason, and no system you build is going to fix it until you understand the reason behind it. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly why this keeps happening, and you'll have a 3-step move that you can run on Monday morning. It's built for the founder who can't let go. Let's start with what you've been telling yourself about why this happens, because ultimately it's all wrong. You said one of these to yourself in the last month, probably more than one. Nobody does it as well as I do. It's just easier if I do it myself. They never quite get it right. Every time I hand something off, I end up redoing it anyway. These may feel like explanations, but the truth is that they are just symptoms. You've been treating them like a diagnosis, like the problem is your perfectionism or your team, or that your standards are just higher than everybody else's. So you try solving each one. You hired somebody better, you wrote the SOP, you sent them examples, and it still didn't work. None of those is the real problem. They're the same problem, just speaking different languages. Identity threat doesn't show up and announce itself. It doesn't tell you what's actually happening. It dresses up in something your conscious mind can accept, like perfectionism, standards, the team's not ready yet. Same threat, just a different costume. I've watched smart, successful founders run these scripts on themselves for years. People who can spot structural problems in their business way faster than I can. And on this one thing, they couldn't see what was happening. The threat was wearing a costume their own mind designed to be invisible to them. So why does the work feel like a part of you in the first place? And why is your brain protecting it like it's protecting you? Let me tell you about a founder I call Mark. I started a creative agency back in 2018, and one of the first cold calls that turned into a yes was Mark. He ran a high-end auto detailing shop. Now this shop had the kind of cars in it that I dreamed of as a kid. And he had just come out of decades in his family's glass business. They had sold it maybe like the year before. And this shop was his not quite ready to retire yet project. And this is the thing that he wanted to do, so he wouldn't fully step away. Now, he thought it would be calmer than the family business, but it ended up being way more. Mark hired us to run his marketing, $5,000 a month. We were creating content and running his Facebook ads to scale his lead flow. Now, his shop was 10 minutes from my house, and Mark was the kind of guy that you just stop in to see. I had just turned 20, fresh out of school, running my first real business, and he was older. He felt like a mentor in a way that most of my clients didn't. So I would swing by some evenings just to talk. One night I was at the shop around 7:30 and the detail bay was quiet. Mark was finishing up this polish on this black sports car, the kind of car that's the reason why people pay 5 figures for it. Now, his phone was on this like rolling tool cart and it rang. Mark stopped what he was doing, walked back into the office, took the call, came back, and he just picked up where he left off. 20 minutes earlier, that was like the 3rd time I had watched him do that. But the thing is, he had an assistant out front working. He had a guy on the floor with him, but every call still went through him. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was his wife. She sent a video. Their son had earned another karate belt that afternoon. So Mark stood in the bay, holding his phone, watching the video, showed me, smiling. Then he looked up at me and said something that I haven't been able to forget. He said, "I started this thing because I thought it'd be less work than a glass company, but it's way worse." Then he put his phone down and went back to the car. That's the night I realized something I couldn't unsee. Mark didn't have a marketing problem. He didn't have a hiring problem either. He had 2 people on payroll and they weren't even the bottleneck. Mark had an identity problem. Every call still went through him, not because his team couldn't handle the call, because that part of him, the handling everything part, was the part of him that was the entire business. If anyone else took the call wasn't getting handled the way that Mark would handle it. And that gap to him was unbearable, even when that person had been doing it for years. We restructured the whole engagement over the next 3 months. Less ad spend, more systems building. We built the systems for calls, scheduling, getting the cars in and out of the bay. I rewrote my own contract to deliver more than we'd quoted because what Mark needed wasn't even more leads. He needed a way out of being the only person who could touch every part of his business. A year later, his shop was the official high-end detailer for that whole region for the product that he was selling. But the thing that still gets me about Mark isn't the result. It's that night in the shop, phone on the cart, wife sending the karate video, Mark watching his son and saying, "It's worse than a glass business." Because Mark wasn't trapped by his business. He was trapped by the part of himself that the business was made out of. And that's the thing that nobody tells you about delegation when they're selling you on the next hire or the next system. You're not trapped by what your team can or can't do. You're trapped by what you lose if they could. See, Mark had 2 employees. Some of you watching may have 12. The number doesn't really matter. The mechanism is still the same. There's a psychologist at Stanford named Claude Steele. He spent 30 years on a single research question. What happens to your behavior when something you're being asked to do feels like it threatens who you think you are? He calls it the identity threat. Here's what Steele found. When a behavior threatens how you see yourself, even subconsciously, your brain doesn't process it as a normal task. It processes it as a threat. The response is automatic. You take the work back, even when you notice you shouldn't. Even when you can do it perfectly, even when you've handled it off. The skill on your team isn't the bottleneck. The threat to your identity is. This is why finding the right person doesn't work. Hiring better doesn't reduce the threat. It increases it, because now there's a bigger reminder that the work doesn't need you to be done. Same reason why build the system doesn't work on its own. You can build the perfect one and still pull the work back at 11 p.m. The system isn't fighting the threat. The threat is bigger than any system. The work is your identity, not your task list. You can't delegate something that's grown into who you are, not until you separate it on purpose. Now look, I used to think this was just Mark. Then I started watching the same pattern in every founder that I've worked with. The cars in the bay changed, the businesses changed, the revenue band changed, but the phone on the cart didn't, and the 7:30 p.m. didn't. Eventually I realized something about myself first, and then about the founders I was working with. When I watched Mark walk back to the office to take the call he didn't need to take, I wasn't watching a stranger. I was watching a version of myself doing the same thing, just in different clothes, editing the deliverable my editor had already finished, reopening that one email just to fix a comma. Same script, just a different costume. Most founders think the trap is the work, the hours, the grind. You treat it like you have a workload problem. If you just had more time, more leverage, a better team, you could finally let go of all this. The trap isn't the work. The trap is the identity that grew into the work without anyone naming it. You can't outwork an identity threat, and you can't out-hire one either. You're probably feeling something right now, maybe a little defensive, maybe a little seen, probably both. That's the system trying to protect itself from being named, which is actually a useful signal. The founders who notice that feeling and stay with it a few seconds longer than feels comfortable are the ones who eventually break out. The ones who push it down and keep scrolling are still doing the same thing in 5 years. So let me give you something you can actually do about it. 3 steps, the whole thing takes under an hour. I'll call it the first cut, because you only have to make the first one. After that, the math changes. Step 1 is to sort. Open up a blank page, write down 10 things you'll do this week, real ones, the ones that are already on your calendar. Next to each one, write one of 2 words, identity or output. Identity is anything where if somebody else did it, you'd feel something shift in who you are. The proposal voice, the first call with a new client, the way the deliverable gets reviewed. The thing that deep down you believe is the part of the business that's actually you. Output is everything else, scheduling, invoicing, the Tuesday email, the thing you've been telling yourself you'd hand off if you could just trust somebody else with it. Most founders have never made this distinction. We treat the whole list as one pile, and that's the mistake. Half your list is identity infused and the other half is just inertia. You've been failing to delegate everything because you've been trying to delegate the wrong first half. Step 2, pick the smallest output task on the list. Not the biggest pain point, not the most strategic one, the smallest one. The one where if you let go of it and the world wobbles a little bit, you will still survive. The goal this week is not to fix your business. The goal is to teach your nervous system one thing: the business survives when you let go. Your brain has been running on a different model for years. It thinks if you let go of it, the whole thing will collapse. The smallest output task is the safest place to prove the model that it's wrong. Step 3 is the 48-hour rule. You hand it to whoever owns it now, or whoever should own it. Then for 48 hours, you do not touch it. You don't open a doc to check it. You don't redo it that night. You don't send a polite follow-up that's actually a takeover. Here's what's going to happen. About 3 hours in, you'll feel a pull, a specific kind of restlessness, and that's the rescue urge. That's the amputation feeling. Now, you have to stay with it. The urge eventually passes, and every hour you don't act on it, the threat shrinks a little bit. 48 hours later, you've done the one thing that actually breaks the loop. You've proved to yourself that the business survives the cut. That's it. Sort, pick the smallest, don't touch it for 48 hours. If you do that one thing this week, you have done more for your business than any system, any hire, or any podcast you binge between now and the end of the month, because you have separated yourself from the work on purpose for the first time. Mark did this with his phone calls. The first time he didn't pick up the phone in his own shop, he texted me about it, said his hand reached for the phone twice before he stopped it. A week later, he stopped reaching because he knew his assistant had it. A month later, calls were going through his assistant by default. Mark actually got the ones that actually needed him, which was almost never. In the first cut, that was it. Before you close this video, one more thing. You're not afraid the team can't do the work. You're afraid that if they can, you find out you weren't even necessary. And that's what's been making you take it back at midnight. That's what makes delegation feels like amputation. Because amputation is the right word, when the only part of you that ever felt necessary is the part you're trying to remove. But here's what nobody tells you about phantom limbs. The feeling of the missing part fades. What grows back in its place is the version of you the business was always going to need next. Sort the list, pick the smallest, don't touch it for 48 hours. That's it.